I will kick us off here. Everyone, my name is Becca Black. I am a technology advisor with Opkalla, and thank you for joining us today to talk about what's at stake with your cybersecurity and cyber insurance. I'm joined by Field CTO Chris Fielder from Arctic Wolf today, and he has so graciously agreed to present to us and get us up to speed on all things cybersecurity and cyber insurance in the changing marketplace. Before we jump into the conversation, I want to just do a brief introduction on Opkalla for anyone on the line who doesn't know. We are a 4-year-old advisory firm based in Charlotte, North Carolina. Chris, if you could go to the next slide. I'd like to brag that Opkalla has just hit the 350 customer mark at our short time in business. And we're so proud to be able to provide advisory services to all of our wonderful customers. We pride ourselves on sitting on the same side of the table as our customers as they evaluate the technology marketplace. We bring lots of great educational content in the form of webinars like this and events. And we have subject matter expertise in pretty much all things technology. So if you ever have a question about your tech, if you need help with an evaluation, please reach out to us. We'd love to get to know you better and help you solve your problems. Chris, if you'd go to the next slide. This is just a quick picture of all the different areas that we work in. So today we're going to be focused more around cybersecurity, but there are many different areas that Opkalla is well positioned to help you with. And with that, I'll kick it over to Chris to get us started with the main event.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that, Becca. My name is Christopher Fielder. As she said, I'm the field CTO here at Arctic Wolf. A little bit of background on me. First, I'm happy to work with Opkalla because I'm actually in Roanoke, Virginia, so not too awfully far from Charlotte. I travel a lot. I don't like the airport here, so I'm actually in Charlotte. I fly out of Charlotte a few times a month, so I'm there pretty often. And I really like the Charlotte area. Background on me, I've been in cybersecurity for 20 plus years. I think we're getting 23, almost 24 years now. It's been a long time. Many of those years were in the hands-on keyboard analyst type capacity, penetration testing, incident response, threat hunting, all the fun stuff that's out there. And now, as a field CTO, the field CTO for Arctic Wolf, my job is more research-based and these type of events. So I get to go out and do research in what is going on in the cybersecurity market, what's going on with threats and threat actors, and just kind of an overall look at cybersecurity, develop research in those areas, and then funnel it back into these type of presentations or reports that, again, can feed into the market. And, I think, or I hope, provide a little bit of understanding and a little bit of help that's out there. And one of the things that's kind of new is this area of cyber insurance. This is something that's actually brought to us quite often. Is one of the things we do at Arctic Wolf is we like to advise as well. So we act as concierge security team, and that allows us to answer a lot of questions that people may have. And one thing they've been asking a lot recently is about cyber insurance. So we did some research here, and I was going to kind of present what we found. But let's set the stage first with, why are people starting to look more at cyber insurance? What's going on? Well, there's quite a few things that are going on. The cyber security landscape is in a state of flux. And that's both from the standpoint of threats, but also the market and what's available to individuals that are out there now. So we recently did some research and a survey where we talked to 700 plus global IT security leaders. These were VPs or CISOs or product owners, people that actually had a stake and had to make decisions for their company. And they had to have a SOC or a security operations center. So these were established companies. And we wanted their opinions on a few different things that are happening out there. And we found some trends and some interesting things that, we can use to set the stage here. And one of them is that 42% of organizations that we talked to suffered a ransomware attack in the last 12 months. So again, these are established organizations that have a 24/7 security operations center and a team of dedicated security analysts, and almost half of them suffered a ransomware attack in the last 12 months. And that's really devastating. Beyond that, 50% of those environments that we spoke with admitted to suffering or detecting a breach in the last year as well. And I like to be cautious with the way I say that. 50% admitted to detecting a breach in the last year. Now, does that mean that the other 50% did not suffer a breach? Absolutely not. Instead, we like to say that 50% did not detect a breach. Now, we also have another stat in our own research that says about 42 to 45% of the organizations that we come into have a latent threat within their environment, meaning that there is a threat that exists within their environment that they have yet to detect, and we're able to detect it. So this may not be the most scientific way to approach this, but if we say 50% of organizations said they detected a threat, and we have another stat that says 42, let's say 42% have a threat in their environment they have not detected, then that averages about what, around 92% of organizations that are suffering some form of a breach, either detected or undetected, within a 12-month span. And yeah, 8 to 10% are not suffering a breach or not getting hit. I think that's a realistic number. Ransomware operators are being paid around 74% of the time. So we actually asked those 42% that suffered a ransomware attack in the last 12 months. We said, okay, biggest question we have for you right now is, did you pay the ransom? 74% of the time, either they paid the full amount, they paid a portion of the amount, or somebody, like a cyber insurance provider, paid on their behalf. But only 26% of the time did they take the hardline stance of saying, we're not going to pay. This is why we're continuing to see an explosion in ransomware. If 3/4 of the time they know they're going to get paid, then that's going to incentivize these ransomware gangs to just keep going and keep pushing to do this. And then we also found that 48% of companies reported having more than 10 or 10 or more open cybersecurity job positions within their company. So there's not enough people doing the jobs. The threats are increasing. The cost of the threats are increasing. And this is just going to continue to be a problem. So what are organizations expected to do? They cannot get the people to do the job. Their budgets are being reduced. They're facing, mounting threats. They're looking for any opportunity to try to reduce the risk. So what are they turning to? And one option is now cyber insurance. And I talked about risk, and I said, you know what? They're trying to reduce risk. And one of the big things with cyber insurance is really dealing with risk. We have a tagline at Arctic Wolf where we say our goal is to end cyber risk. Now, that's an impossible goal, because if you know anything about risk, there's a lot of things that you can do with it, as it says right here. One thing you can never do with risk is eliminate it or end it. But we've set that goal for ourselves at Arctic Wolf of saying that we want to end it. That way we have an unattainable goal that we're going to continue to work for. But what can we do with risk? Well, there's a lot of things that we can do with it. One is that we can avoid it, right? We can do what we can to try to avoid that risk, to minimize it as well. So we can mitigate it. So we can minimize its impact, minimize the potential for a risk that's out there. And we can retain the risk as well, meaning we can accept it. So I like to think about this kind of like deciding to ride a motorcycle, right? So we can avoid the risk by saying, you know what, I'm not going to get on the motorcycle. You're going to completely avoid it. But, if you really want to ride a motorcycle, then you're kind of missing out on all the fun. So we don't want to always avoid it. But we can minimize or mitigate the risk by saying we're going to wear, safety gear. We're going to wear a helmet. We're going to take a class. We're going to learn what we, need to do on the bike. We're going to only ride when it's good weather. So we're going to minimize the risk. But we can't completely avoid the risk, right? We can't eliminate it completely. So there's going to be some risk left. And what are we going to do with that remaining risk? Well, we can accept it or retain it, but we don't want to always do that as well because, we can accept, okay, I may get into an accident. I don't want to. That's just the risk of riding. But do I want to take on all that risk myself? Not necessarily. So is there somebody else that can help me with that risk? Can I transfer that risk to somebody else? And that's where cyber insurance comes into play. With riding a motorcycle would be getting insurance. So if something does happen to you, it will pay for, potential medical issues. It will pay for the cost of any kind of repairs. With cyber insurance, we're saying, hey, we know that there's a lot of risk that's out there. We have tried to avoid it by not including unnecessary tools and technology and unnecessary risk into our environment. We've tried to mitigate it by doing things like patching and eliminating unnecessary processes that could involve more threats. We've accepted some of the risk as well. We say, you know what, that's just the business, the nature of business now is we know that some risk is going to be involved. But how much of this can we also transfer? Can we involve a cyber organization or a cyber insurance organization to transfer some of this too? And what's interesting about this is we've seen a kind of odd reaction in this area where initially cyber insurance companies were very eager to get into this space where they said, absolutely, you can transfer that risk to us. We will write you a policy. You can pay a certain premium. And then if you are compromised for certain areas, then we will cover that for you. But they may have jumped into it too quickly. And they may not have fully understood the amount of risk and the amount of threats that were out there and the cost of a lot of those threats as well. A couple years ago, the highest ransom ever paid was paid partially by an insurance company. And that was 40 million US dollars was the ransom that was paid. And that put a serious dent in that company that had to pay for that and their insurance provider. And another reason that, they are feeling some pain here in the cyber insurance market is because when they did jump into it, they didn't have the same strict requirements that they're now turning to. There are requirements that say you have to have X, Y, and Z in order to get a policy. And if you don't have these things, or if you don't maintain them, then you can't get a policy or we're not going to renew your policy. So what are those things? Now, this is not a strict rule saying every cyber insurance provider that's out there is going to require these things. But what we have seen is that a majority of them are going to require most, if not all of these. Now, you may still find some that are saying, hey, we're only going to require 2 or 3 of these, but their premiums are going to be a lot higher. More often, if you can provide more security, prove that you have, your posture tightened up and you have these things in place, you're going to get a much better premium. So what are these things that they're often requiring now or wanting? One that we're seeing is kind of a hard line, you have to have this, is multi-factor authentication. 2-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication, not relying upon simple passwords for logging in. Now, is this infallible? Absolutely not. We have seen multiple instances. In fact, there was just the recent Uber breach that relied upon multi-factor authentication bombing, where you just sent a request out to everybody in the organization to just see who would accept it. So it's not infallible, but it is one more step to try to mitigate some of that risk. They're evolving past saying, hey, you have to have just antivirus, right? So initially, a lot of insurance providers were saying you have to have at a minimum a firewall and antivirus. Now they're saying you have to have EDR or EPP or both. So endpoint detection and response and an endpoint prevention platform, an agent on your endpoints that's monitoring what is happening, looking for threats, and in many cases, attempting to stop those threats if they reach a certain point. You have to have a good backup plan where you have to be creating backups at a certain frequency, encrypting them and taking them offline and testing them for threats as well. Specifically when it comes to things like ransomware, because there's quite a bit of ransomware that will try to bury itself in the backups so that if you go, because what's the first thing you want to do if you get hit with ransomware? You go, I'll just restore from backups. But if the ransomware is in the backups and it's set to go off at a certain stage, it's like a logic bomb, you restore the backup, then it detonates again, and you're right back where you started. But they're still saying you have to have good backups. You need to test those backups, encrypt them, and keep them offline so they can't be locked up or they can't be infected. You have to have some sort of email filtering and web security because phishing is such a major concern now. One of the primary ways that a lot of attackers are getting into environments is through phishing mechanisms. So they want to be able to say, are you filtering some of those phishing emails out? Are you attempting to stop that risk? Patch management. A lot of organizations were devastated by some of these recent vulnerabilities, things like Log4j, Spring4Shell, the SolarWinds incident. There was a big one with Microsoft Exchange, right? And so do you have a good process in place to patch these vulnerabilities when they are seen? Right now, it's taking on average of over 200 days to actually patch some of these ones that are well known. Again, I talked about Log4j, Spring4Shell. These are incredibly well known. There are active exploit campaigns going on against them, and it's taking on average over 200 days to identify and patch them in many organizations. And that's a problem. So these insurance companies are saying, we want you to have a strong patch management process. They also want you to have an incident response plan and to test that plan. That way, if things do go south, if there is a problem, you can stop that from getting any further, right? And the same way that your home, if you go to get an insurance policy, they want you to have a certain amount of things. They want you to have smoke detectors. They want you to have a fire extinguisher. They want you to be relatively close to a fire department to get a better premium. It would be great if your house had a sprinkler system, but many of them don't now, or they won't. But if you could have that, again, it would lower your premium even more. In the same way, they want you to have a good incident response plan so that in the event there is that situation, you can immediately go into action. You can stop it from progressing further, and you can minimize the cost of what it's actually going to end up being. They want you to have some form of employee training or make sure your employees are aware that they are what are really going to be targeted by a lot of these attackers. Things like social engineering, and I mentioned phishing before, go directly after attackers, or excuse me, go directly after employees, go after the users. Because it's great to say from an attacker standpoint, hey, I'm going to use a vulnerability. I'm going to use an exploit, right? From my days of penetration testing, I'm going to tell you, put it in the context of like trying to break into a house. What's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to go around and you're going to check all the locks. You're going to jiggle the door handles, see if there's any open windows, try to get into the house through one of those ways. In the same way, if you're trying to break into a network, you're going to see, hey, are there any open ports? Are there any systems that I can gain access to? If not, in the same way, okay, all the doors are locked. What's the next thing to do? Well, I need to get into that door. How about if I have somebody give me a key? If I need to get into a network, how about if I have somebody give me a password? So that's social engineering. Sometimes it could be as easy as simply calling up an employee and saying, hey, I'm calling from the help desk. We want to make sure that your password is correct. What's your password again? Oh, yeah, that is correct. Yep. Okay, good. I know it sounds ridiculous, but you'd be surprised how, maybe not surprised how often some of these things work. And that's why a lot of times attackers will default to those methods as a way to easily and quickly get into an environment. And the only way to really stop this or mitigate it is to train your people, to have some sort of security awareness program in place. And these insurance companies want to see that. And then finally, implementing the principle of least privilege, making sure that you don't have a lot of accounts that are sitting out there that have, domain admin privileges that are set to never expire. They're just floating around. They're not being monitored. A lot of service accounts with, system level privileges that are just being utilized and not monitored. Again, implementing least privilege to ensure that attackers have to really strive to get one of those high profile accounts. And again, what I was saying is not every cyber insurance company is going to say you have to have all of these, but they would like for you to. And if you have these, or most of them, or even all of them, you can pretty much guarantee your premium is going to be lower than if you were to only have a few of these. And if you do only have a few of these, there's a high likelihood that you're going to have difficulty getting a policy. Some additional concerns that are being seen by these cyber insurance providers. They're saying, okay, we were not fully prepared, unfortunately, for the policies that we were writing. And insurance companies are not in the business of losing money. So when they started to have to pay out a lot of these policies, they had to take a step back and go, whoa, what are the problems here? What are we trying to cover as well? What can we write into the policy? And what do we need to make sure that we are prepared for? Four big ones are ransomware, which we talked about before. Remember, I said 42% of organizations that we spoke with that have extensive security programs were still hit with ransomware. And if those larger enterprises that are secured are still susceptible to ransomware, then small to medium businesses are absolutely susceptible to ransomware. And more so, they're getting hit with an even greater frequency. So these insurance providers are saying we need to do something about ransomware. We either need to make sure that the organization that we are covering is prepared for ransomware, that they have all those things that we talked about in place, including 24/7, 365 coverage, monitoring the environment and being able to respond to ransomware very quickly. Or some of these providers are saying, you know what, we'll give you a policy, we will reduce the premiums, but we're going to put an exception in there for ransomware, saying we'll cover things like a data breach that I'll talk about in a moment. But if you're hit with ransomware, we're not going to cover that. And you can choose to sign that. Now, again, that's not every provider. That's not super common. I mean, we do see it once in a while, but a lot of people are going to these insurance providers because they're saying, I'm concerned about ransomware, scared about ransomware. And if you're then said, okay, well, we'll cover everything except for that, you're probably not going to sign that policy. They're also concerned about data breaches, right? Data breaches can cost quite a bit of money that's out there because, you could be subject to a lawsuit, you can lose intellectual property, you can get hit with compliance fees and fines. So there's a lot of things that come with a data breach besides just, the cost of like ransomware. So what is it going to take for an insurance provider to cover that area? They need to take that into consideration. Supply chain attacks. We are seeing these as an increase. And, when we recently did our threat report at Arctic Wolf, we predicted this is going to continue to be a problem for the next few years, is these supply chain attacks. For those of you that aren't as familiar, the basic concept is I am an attacker and I want to go after you, but you are very smart when it comes to cybersecurity. You're doing your due diligence. You have all those things in place that I talked about. You've got plenty of employees, you're monitoring your environment 24/7, 365, you're good to go. So what do I do if I'm an attacker and I can't find a way in, and you're training your people, so I can't get them either? I start looking for who you're doing business with, who you let in the building, who you let into your network, and I compromise them. And then that allows me to then ride in through that supply chain. And a big one I mentioned before was SolarWinds. SolarWinds was attacked, but they were not the ultimate target. The ultimate target was everybody else that SolarWinds did business with. And that was a massive supply chain compromise. Another one was Kaseya as well. They unfortunately hit a lot of MSSPs. But again, we're going to continue to see this. So these insurance companies are concerned about this because they're saying, okay, do you have something in place to prepare yourself for a supply chain compromise? Are you monitoring for this? Or is this just a risk that we're going to have to take? And then how do we build that into the policy? And then finally, war, terrorism, and systemic exclusions. Do these insurance providers, do they write exclusions for what's going on in some areas of the country? Or do they just say, hey, this is part of doing business? It's something they have to consider as well. And all these go into consideration when they start to write your policies and when they start to develop those premiums. And that's why they can be so high. And that's why you can see such drastic increases in those premiums when you go to renew. So, okay, we see that, it's not super easy to get an insurance policy now. There's going to be a lot of cost associated with it. There's going to be some work that's going to have to, be done to make yourself insurable. So what can you do? How can you improve your insurability? And that's one of the things that we at Arctic Wolf are here for. So let me start by explaining who we really are. So Arctic Wolf, a company that I work for, the reason I came to this company is because we're founded on a pretty basic idea. There are enough tools out there, and we didn't want to bring another tool to the market. Now, there are amazing tools that are out there, those EDR, those EPP tools, the network traffic analysis, the SIMs, these are all great tools that are out there. But there's one problem with all of them, and that's that you have to have people to run them. And as I said before, 42% of organizations are trying to hire 10 or more people. They cannot get hands on keyboard. They cannot get people in the seats. So we are a purely services company. We are out there to solve that problem and to bring services to the market. And we are holistic and we are vendor neutral, meaning we don't require a certain set of tools. We work with anything you have in your security stack, whether you have a very extensive set of security tools or you have a very lean stack. We can work with either of those. We can work in pretty much any environment. And as I said, we are holistic, meaning our platform looks at every area of your environment that I'll talk about here in just a moment. But this is what we provide just with our service that helps you achieve insurability. One is that 24/7, 365 eyes on glass security operations that's delivered as a concierge service. Concierge service means we learn your environment. We really provide whatever it is you need to help secure your environment and get you to that next level of your security journey. We don't have skeleton crews. We don't have off hours. We don't take holidays. Even though I wish we did, I wish we had more time off. Unfortunately, we don't. We don't take time off. We're always monitoring our customer environments and making sure that we are securing them. As I said before, we are holistic and vendor neutral. So all of those tools that I mentioned, all those technologies that the insurance companies want to see, we work with all of them. And we don't say we only work with this set of vendors. We work with what you have. And if you don't have something in your environment right now, that's not a problem. We can still work with you and allow you to add it later on without concern that you have to choose a certain set of tools. Because again, we want to be vendor neutral. That is something that we think is unique and something that is necessary to provide this style of service. We provide detection, response, remediation with full incident response capabilities. Remember I said before that those insurance providers want to see that you have some sort of an incident response plan in place. So we can do this a few different ways. One is with our detection and response, right? Managed detection response that allows us to go in, detect a threat, and immediately respond to it. So we can go in and say, okay, we see that there is potential ransomware on this, this box right here, or there is a threat or a potential breach. Let's isolate that system. Let's prevent it from going any further. And let's work with you, the customer, to remediate it. And just that plan right there, the insurance companies love to hear that. They love to hear that you have somebody monitoring 24/7, 365 that has a plan in place and can respond almost immediately. The agents are already on the boxes. But we also offer incident response retainers, and we call their incident response jumpstart. And this says, okay, in the event that there is a situation, you already have somebody on your side. And I go back to that fire analogy again, right? The idea being, okay, you've got smoke detectors, you've got sprinkler systems, you've got fire extinguishers in your house. But that doesn't mean that you want to lay off the fire department, right? Because yeah, that's going to solve a lot of the problem. But if the fire grows beyond the capacity of where you can handle it, you want to call in the experts. And we have in-house experts. We don't need them all the time. In fact, we existed for 10 plus years without a full incident response retainer and team because we simply didn't need it. But now our customers said, hey, for the purposes of insurability, for the purposes of compliance, we want that. And so we brought that to market. And we did it in a way where we say, you know what, we want to make this as cost effective as possible. So we don't require you to buy a lot of hours up front. And then proactive planning from lessons learned to minimize future impact. In other words, if we do identify a threat in your environment, we don't simply say, okay, we responded to it, we stopped it, now let's move on to the next thing. We take all the data that we learned from that situation and we feed it back into what we call your security journey. This way, we help you build out a plan of how to ensure that that doesn't happen again. And again, that's something insurance companies love to hear. They love to hear that if you do catch a threat, that you've now essentially inoculated yourself from that happening in the future. That way they're not on the hook to pay for a threat happening again or a larger situation. And these things happen both pre and post incident. So we're planning before a threat occurs. And then if a threat does occur, if we identify a breach, if we identify a threat actor, we are able to move on it very quickly and then stop it and then learn from it. And the cycle repeats itself. Now, how do we offer all of this? Well, I said, we're vendor neutral and we're holistic. Holistic meaning we look at every area in the environment. That includes the endpoints. So we want to know what's happening on the endpoints. We work with all the major endpoint vendors that are out there. Again, we're vendor agnostic, but we also have our own agent as well. For defense and depth purposes, we always recommend pairing our agent with whatever additional EDR, EPP agent you're choosing, just to provide that extra layer of security, layer of visibility. We don't charge for our agent as well. As I said, we're not a tool company. We're not selling this agent. Instead, it just allows us to provide a little bit more visibility, see what's going on, and take action if necessary. We can actually isolate systems at the kernel level to prevent a threat from propagating any further. We look at the network. We want to know what is going on at that network level. What is going on with the traffic, what's coming in and going out of the environment. We look at the cloud resources. So SaaS, we look at platform as a service. We want to know what is going on in those cloud resources, because that's such a problem now. A lot of environments are just simply throwing cloud capabilities into their architecture and not really weighing the potential security risks that come with it. So we want to make sure we're monitoring that very closely. We're able to look at identity. So remember I said multi-factor authentication is something that insurance companies want to see. We're able to work with multi-factor authentication, and we can actually detect threats at that level. So if we see things like impossible travel, if we see unusual multi-factor authentication utilization, giant pushes to multiple people, or somebody logs in from one location, but the MFA push comes from another location. Again, we can detect that, we can respond to it and prevent it before it escalates any further. We also take a look at people, behaviors, UEBA. We do log ingestion, so all the best parts of a SIM without having to deploy a full SIM. Again, we are that holistic nature. We want to look at every area of the environment, and we don't piecemeal this by saying, hey, you got to pay for this one and this one and this one and this one. All that telemetry, all that data comes into our cloud. It goes into our open XDR architecture. This is our platform. Think of it like a data lake. And then we deliver our services on top of that. Build this out fairly quickly, but you can see our services are things like the managed detection response, the managed cloud detection, the cloud detection response, data exploration, which allows you to really dig in and see what is going on kind of behind the curtain. We have, I'm going to brag about in just a moment, the rate at which we notify you. But I'll tell you that one thing we've heard from customers is, hey, this works really well. And I'm actually concerned that you're not catching everything because I hear from you so infrequently. And so we said, oh, that's good, right? I mean, we're not constantly bothering you and we're taking care of things behind the scene. But if you want to know what's going on, we have this data exploration now that allows you to look at, the data that comes in and what we're doing with it. Manage risk is our proactive vulnerability management service you can think of, or managing the actual risks. And again, insurance companies love it when you implement something like that. Cloud security posture management and our managed security awareness. Now, I talked before about how it is the users, they're ultimately the ones that are going to be targeted. And so we have the ability to now train them and teach them. And this all goes through the concierge security team. So this is tailored. The actual curriculum is tailored to your environment and what your employees need to learn. And you've heard me use this term concierge a few times. So how do we explain this? The way I explain it is, well, what is concierge? And I answer that question with another question. What do you need? Right? I don't know if anyone here has ever read, there's a book about Motley Crue called The Dirt. They talk about some of the things they did in hotels. If the concierge would help them with certain things, we are certainly not going to go that far. But what we do is we say, well, what do you need? What is ultimately going to get you to that next stage of your security posture? What is going to help you out? What's going to improve your environment? And that is what we mean by concierge. Anything that we could do to help you get to that next level. In the same way that if you go through the process of building your own SOC, right? Maybe put 7 figures into building your own SOC. You should be able to stick your head in the door of that SOC and say, hey, I need a report on how we stand with compliance. I need a report on how we stand with Log4j. Just thinking of things here. I need to know that we're training our people if there's any issues with awareness and, anyone that's susceptible to phishing, and ask for all these updates and, reports and modifications. And the answer should be, yes, we can do that. And that's the approach that we take. Yes, we can do that. Let's work with you on that. Let's make sure that we are giving you what you need to get to that next stage of your security journey. And some things that we want to brag about here real quick. And again, these are all numbers that insurance companies love to see, and this is why they love to work with us. So right now, the industry average time to identify an intrusion, so somebody actually getting into your environment, the industry average is 206 days. We have it down to 30 minutes or less. I am unfortunately old, so to me, 30 minutes or less makes me think of pizza. They used to say that you can get a pizza in 30 minutes or less, or it was free. They don't do that anymore because I think they gave too many away. But now, we can detect a threat in an environment faster than you can get a pizza most of the time. And we do that in 30 minutes when the industry average is 206 days. We're really proud of that. The 39% of the time, threats were detected after 8 p.m. and before 8 a.m. by us. So we're monitoring environment at all hours. Almost 40% of the time, it's coming in after normal business hours. So this is why those insurance companies want to see somebody monitoring around the clock, because not quite half, but almost half the time, these attackers are going to be coming in outside of those normal hours. And if you're only staffed from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., you're probably going to miss quite a bit of threats. 43% of our customers have advanced threat activity that is missed by security tools, but is caught by us. I mentioned this at the top of the discussion, right? I said that 50% of organizations admitted to suffering a breach they detected. We also say that 43% have a threat in their environment that was missed by their current security tools or their current stack, but we caught it once we came in, a latent threat that exists in there. So these threats are prevalent throughout environments. 69% of customers have some form of PII, or that's personal identifiable information exposure, with 19% being things like critical exposures, plain text passwords, floating throughout their environment. So we are concerned about account takeover, and that's why we monitor for things like account takeover and business email compromise so closely, because we know that this is bad hygiene in a lot of environments. Speaking from my own experience, again, of being a penetration tester, we would go through and look for things like, hey, as soon as you get into the building, if you're doing a physical test, just walk through the cubicles, turn over keyboards, look for people that have written their passwords on a Post-it note, stuck it on their desk, stuck it under their keyboard. If you're able to look over people's shoulders, it's pretty much guaranteed somebody is going to have a document sitting on their desktop that says passwords or a spreadsheet. That's really risky, and it's pretty prevalent in environments. As we said, 69% of the time those things exist. And so that's why we need to monitor for things like account takeover, unauthorized access, unauthorized usage of multi-factor authentication, business email compromise, so that we can detect it, we can move on it quickly, and not let those things like account takeover really decimate the environment. 58% reduction in the time to patch critical vulnerabilities after activating Arctic Wolf. So I mentioned before how these insurance companies want a good patching program in place. And they want you to not just say, okay, well, I have a program, it looks good on paper, but I don't actually do anything. They want you to show and demonstrate that you're doing something. We have reduced the time to patch critical vulnerabilities by 58%. So we're able to go through, and one of the major things that we can do that a lot of people are, take for granted is we're able to tell you if you have unpatched vulnerabilities. One of the first things we did when Log4j became a major issue and it was first announced is we scanned our customer environments and just picked up the phone and started calling each one of them saying, hey, I don't know if you've heard about this Log4j thing yet. Here's what it is. We scanned your environment. Either yes, you are vulnerable to it, or you're not vulnerable to it. If you are not, good for you. If you are, here's what we're going to do to work with you to make sure that we mitigate this risk and solve this problem. And again, insurance companies eat that up. They love that. Phishing, 18% of customers have phishing activity that is missed by email security, but is caught by us. And we think this is because of our concierge security approach. We're able to identify unusual activity. We're able to look at things that maybe look normal, but are not. And then again, move on that fairly quickly. So I'm going to open up to hear for questions in just a moment, but I'm just going to leave it with this, why we work so well with insurance companies. There's a few different things. One is the protection, right? So we are protecting against a lot of the threats that are out there. We're monitoring the full attack surface, and we're looking at everything 24/7, 365. We have resilience. So we provide proactive risk management, which insurance companies really want to see, continuous posture assessments, and sustained compliance. So in addition to things like cyber insurance, we can also help you maintain compliance standards. We offer guidance through our concierge security team. So if you're like, hey, my insurance company really wants me to add on, I'll just say multi-factor authentication. Which one do you think would be best for my environment? We can have those discussions with you. Or if you're like, hey, we are looking at buying these 4 different technologies or these 4 different tools. How should we implement them? In what order should we implement them? Should we implement them? Is it going to work for my environment? We can't tell you definitively yes or no, not, to do these things, but we can talk to you about it. We can provide guidance. We can tell you our recommendations. We have a framework tailored for your environment that we can work with, whether that's CMMC or whether it's NIST, whatever framework you like to work with, we can work with that as well. And we have world-class expertise on demand. Our people are experts in this field. And a very fast time to value. So we leverage your existing investment. We don't make you go out and buy a bunch of new tools. We don't rip and replace. We work with what you have or what you don't have. We then add to it without saying you have to add tools. So we have our own agent. Again, we don't charge for our sensor, which is just giving us network visibility and doing log ingestion, and our people. And we greatly reduce the noise. Let me give you a statistic here real quick. So right now, we process petabytes of data per day, right? But across all of our customer environments, across everybody, we average 1 ticket per customer per day. So we ingest all that data from all of these customers and all of these environments, and we look at it all, and we have a 99% reduction rate in false positive. So we reduce false positives by 99%. And that gets us down to on average of 1 ticket per customer per day, meaning you're only going to hear from us once per day. And when you get that ticket, this is legit. This has been verified. This has been assessed. This is not a false positive. Now I need to take a look at this and actually see what Arctic Wolf has done and see what their guidance or their recommendation is. Or in many cases, if it is a true threat, it's not even going to be an email or an alert. It's going to be a phone call from us, and you need to take it. So we're very proud of that as well. And then all of this is backed by something that I didn't mention yet, but this is kind of the icing on the cake, and something that insurance companies really love about us is we offer our security operations warranty. So this is up to $1 million, up to $1 million in coverage that, I said before that 74% of organizations paid some aspect of the ransom when they were hit. Not all of them paid the full amount, and not all of them paid themselves. Some of them use things like insurance providers and warranties. So we offer that warranty. It takes the pressure off of you, and it takes the pressure off of the insurance company if a situation does arise. And it incentivizes us to make sure that a situation won't arise. So, Becca, I don't know if you want to talk about this. Okay, I can go ahead and read it though, if that's okay. But yeah, so with this, we're offering Opkalla customers that complete an introductory meeting with us by July 31st, a $150 gift card to Crowd Cow, which is an American online meat delivery marketplace. Okay, I've never used that myself, but it actually sounds pretty cool. Unfortunately, I can't take a meeting with the company I work for. What I'll do now, though, is say that I'll open up to any questions. So did we get any questions that came in?
We do have a couple questions that have come in, and for everyone, I encourage you, if you have any questions for Chris or myself, please drop them in the Q&A. But we have one around approaching the topic of cyber insurance coverage with a board of directors who leans towards the lowest price policies, or even leans towards foregoing cyber insurance coverage altogether. How would you approach that?
Yeah, so foregoing cyber insurance coverage altogether, the analogy is very easy. Are you going to drive your car without any insurance on it? And if you're talking to a board of directors, I guarantee almost everybody in that room is driving a really nice car. And are they going to drive that car without any insurance on it? The answer is almost, no across the board. In the same way, are you going to operate your company and your cybersecurity program without any form of cyber insurance, without a safety net? And if you look at it that way, the answer should be pretty much no, we can't do that. Now, then I understand the idea of saying, okay, well, we need to get cyber insurance. Let's just go with the lowest premium, right? Let's go with the lowest price. You get what you pay for, right? And so I would say the lowest price, you need to absolutely work with your legal department and work with the experts in your cybersecurity team to go through that policy in detail, to look for things like what is eliminated, what has been, what exceptions were made, what is included, and what amount is included. How much will they pay? Am I paying a premium for something and they're only going to cover a fraction of what a breach would cost, or they're only going to cover, 10% of what an actual ransomware breach would cost? So yeah, I would say I understand the idea of saying, let's just go with the cheapest one, but just like with everything in life, you get what you pay for. So absolutely, compare not just prices, but compare apples to apples. Make sure that you're getting first the policy that you were looking for. So sit down and write out, what do I want this insurance policy, this program to cover? What are my ideal expectations? And then find the policies that all meet those expectations, and then compare price. Okay.
Yeah, great advice. And I have heard before, when evaluating cyber insurance policies, it can be a lot to read and understand exactly what you're getting. And it's important to ask your insurance brokers what is not included in your policy.
Yes.
So that they have the opportunity to be upfront with any gaps that they know are in the coverage.
Absolutely. Do we
Okay.
get yeah, go ahead, Becca. I'm sorry.
We have a couple more questions. So one
Sure.
of them has to do with comparing to a competitor, I think. So companies like CrowdStrike offer XDR services. Can you give a quick summary of the main difference between Arctic Wolf's XDR and CrowdStrike's XDR? And maybe we can expand that to, even like SentinelOne and some other EDR companies.
Sure. Yeah. Let me start by saying CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Defender for Endpoint from Microsoft, Carbon Black, Cylance, whoever it is, cyber insurance want an agent with EDR EPP on the box. We love those tools. We highly recommend, just like in cyber insurance provider, that everyone gets some form of an EDR or EPP or both on their endpoints, right? So we love those tools. That's why we're vendor neutral and we work with all of them. So we don't necessarily compare when we're looking at just the tools, because we're not a tools company. We will work with all the telemetry that comes off of all those tools. Now, if the question is, how do we compare to some of the services that they offer? I'll put it to you pretty simplistically, right? We think that they provide great services for what they do. All of those vendors are offering services that are focused on their tool, right? You're hiring them to run their tool. You're hiring us to run and work with you on your security program. So ultimately, it's going to come down to, what is your goal? Are you looking for a service that is there to run and operate your EDR and EPP tool? Or are you looking for a service to run and operate and work with your security program? And if you're looking for that holistic security program approach, that's what we are here for. If you're looking for a company that just, you say, hey, I purchased EDR, I don't have enough people to run it, I got everything else covered, then that's what that service is for. And we do have some customers that actually use both services, and we work well with that. So, we try to be friendly with everybody that's out there. So I don't like to say, I don't like to draw those strict, like say, hey, oh, they're competitors, because they're really not. They have what they're focused on and their service is focused on, and what our service is focused on is a little bit different. So I hope that answered that.
I think that is helpful. It's challenging in this marketplace with all the 3-letter acronyms that get to really discern what is what, and being able to ask the right questions of our vendors we're evaluating helps kind of paint that picture better. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no problem.
We've got another one.
Sure, please.
Containment. So we have a ton of Microsoft tools, including Defender, which at Opkalla we're hearing all kinds of adoption of the Defender platform, Defender for endpoint. Can Arctic Wolf do containment on those products? For example, if it's 2 a.m. or over a holiday, can you take action?
Absolutely, we can. So when we say that we are managed detection and response, we wouldn't be much of MDR if we didn't have that response component, right? And so we absolutely can. So we can work with the major endpoint vendors that are out there that, a good example you mentioned is Defender for Endpoint. We absolutely can. We have the ability to use that tool to isolate or, contain that system at the network level, prevent it from communicating with other devices. And what you're really preventing it from doing is spreading that infection out. You're really, containing it or putting it in the penalty box. Yes, we have the ability to do that. We can do it with all the major endpoint vendors that are out there. We also do it with our own agent as well, which is why we highly recommend our agent, which is at no additional charge, be deployed in conjunction with all of these major vendors. That way, if one of them fails, or maybe you don't get it on the endpoint, right? So maybe there's not a version available, or you're not fully deployed, whatever it may be. We act as that additional layer of defense and an additional layer of visibility. So we can actually isolate the kernel level as well. And what I'll say on top of that is, with our network sensor and our ability to do, network monitoring and act as an intrusion detection system, intrusion prevention system, what we can do is, in many environments, if we are placed in the right architectural capacity, so being in line, we can do network level blocking as well. So say, we see a threat that is attempting to propagate through the environment, we would absolutely want to isolate the hosts. But if we are set up in a certain way in this environment, we could say, you know what, terminate the traffic to that location, prevent that from spreading there as well. So we have multiple response capabilities we're able to do. And our customers really like that, because, something happens at 2 a.m., we can isolate the machine and then wait for them to come back in before we start talking to them about, this is what we found. We made sure it didn't propagate any further. Now, this is how we're going to go about resolving the situation.
Very good. And it's my understanding that all of those kind of remediation plans and procedures are agreed upon during an initial onboarding, like
Yes.
How far you guys will go, because you wouldn't want to potentially shut down a business operation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we go through that in great detail during onboarding to make sure, you're comfortable with us doing that. Something that you do authorize, which systems you're like, no, don't ever isolate that system. We make sure that we're aware of that, and we work with you on it. We also are able to work with you on things like who do we contact, right? In the event of a situation, if you're like, hey, there are 2 people that you call at 2 a.m. and don't call anybody else. We make sure that we note that. And yeah, it's very customizable in that way.
Wonderful. Awesome. Yeah, I know that many of my clients who have Arctic Wolf deployed are very happy with the services and sleep.
Great to hear that. That's great to hear.
So the questions are still open. If anyone has any last minute questions to drop in, we've gotten several about booking a meeting. So I've dropped, I believe I have also the contact information for everyone who's registered for the webinar. So between now and the end of July, if you book a meeting with us and Arctic Wolf, you get $150 to buy some steaks for your summer pool party.
That's awesome. Very cool. Well,
Cool.
what I will say is, if anybody does have any additional questions after this, I know not everybody likes to ask in an open forum like this. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email as well, or really anybody in the Arctic Wolf staff. We're always willing to talk to you, answer any questions, see how we can help. So everyone is more than welcome to reach out anytime.
Thank you so much, Chris. And to kind of close this out, and as a reminder, Arctic Wolf is your concierge for security operations, and Opkalla can function as your concierge for overall technology. And we have a great partnership due to the way we similarly support our clients. I really appreciate everyone taking time out of their day today to attend this webinar. I hope you learned something new about cybersecurity and cyber insurance, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Becca.
Nice job, Chris.
Goodbye, everyone.